It is the Friday Free Kick with our buddy Greg Garza as he tips his hat to us. TV star Greg Garza.
Oh, man.
TV star Greg Garza. I have to start with that, sir. How did that phone call happen where they knocked on your door and they're like, dude, we want you to be a part of our broadcast team? How did this go down?
I feel like I think I might be one of those like last resort guys to where they call me like 2 days before and be like, hey, we weren't able to get anybody that we wanted to. Are you able to fly down in 2 days? And usually it doesn't work because my schedule has been, very busy, which is great, obviously. But, I think it was a special opportunity and a unique one. And I've been asked before to do other things, but, I guess I love being a part of the game in whatever way possible, and sometimes sharing opinions and sharing details and insight from whatever piece of the game that we played is always fun. But it was a very busy couple of days. Those guys are absolute movie stars, right? They're like actors. They're traveling one day. They left that scene and then went to another scene, and it's just like, holy moly, man! It's a lot of time and work put in, but an awesome and fun experience.
So then let me ask you this. Now that you've been a part of a television presentation and you've been a pundit, what part of that experience can you take with you to talk to your mentees about going outside of your comfort zone, being a part of something like that? What can you carry with you from that moment there at the Snake Pit in Glendale that you can carry forward with you?
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things that you talk about, especially even with players, is the best thing that you gain when you play at certain levels is experience, right? And you look at Caleb Wiley, for example, right? He's thrown into the mix at the very last minute of the game, but what does that give him? It gives him a game under his belt. It gives him experience, and that's what you need in everything in life. I think with the more experience and the more wisdom and knowledge you're able to gain, the better you get at something, right? I think it was an important pop of the cherry moment for me, but at the same time, a lot to look at and learn from and use. And if they ever need me again, and any feedback that I can have to help better that the ideology of everything that I bring to the table, then so be it.
And it's always what I tell folks about that kind of experience and dealing with a television audience is, and I'll tell high school kids this or college kids this, and give them that kind of behind the scenes bit is, I ask them in these classes how many of them have ever had a dog as a part of their family. And you go and the dog likes to go and likes to play fetch. And if you've ever gone to a lake and you take the stick with the dog and you throw the stick in the water and the dog goes after it, when the dog gets the stick and starts to come back to shore with the stick in its teeth, what do you see above the water line? You just see the dog, and he's huffing and puffing, and he's bringing the stick back to the shore. That is what everybody sees when it comes to live television. You just see what's above the water line with the dog coming back to shore. What's going on below the water line with the dog? The dog's doing this, man. The dog is making sure that everything is being, going forward, paddling like crazy. That's what everybody doesn't see when it comes to live television, to make sure that what Greg Garza and everybody was doing comes across as flawlessly as possible. You don't see everything going on below the water line to make sure that the dog carries the stick back to shore. And I think it's one of the best analogies that I can come up with. It's like there's a lot of stuff we see, and then what we think we see and what we do when it comes to whatever activity we're talking about. But there's a lot we don't see to make sure that what we're doing comes to the fore like that.
I think the coolest thing about that is what you said. I love that. I love that analogy and that example. It's everything, every team that you are involved with, whether it be whatever organization, whether it be a professional team, whether it be a TV team, right? There's very little, there's a very small amount of people that are involved that get to do the limelight of things, right? but the people that are around them to make them successful is infinite. There were a team. I mean, right when I touched down, I had a team pick me up, team of 3 or 4 people. We had meetings throughout the day. I probably met about 75 people that I obviously now I've forgotten every single one of their names. But they were the ones that were responsible for making 4 of us, right? 4 of us successful that night. Hopefully successful, right? But it is insane. And you look at Atlanta United. You look at the 11 guys that play, right? But the front office, right? The people who work in the front office, the people who are making the spectacle be what it is every single game, or all the other. I think a good word for that is just preparation, right? That's a great way to kind of use, even for our mentees, even for players, how important preparation is over everything. Sticking to routines, sticking to habits, but everything ultimately ends up to how prepared you are to be successful.
When it comes to preparation, and this might be a generational thing that you can address, do different generations have different understandings about all of the moving parts to make something successful, or is it something that is learned over time, that there might be some shock value about all of the investment that comes from a bunch of different places to make sure that the mission is as one, that it is very Borg-like, that it is the collective going forward? How much of a realization do mentees have about the collective to make sure that something happens, or is it something that they've had to learn over time?
That's a good question, because I think individually it is all about making routines and habits that make you feel comfortable. Collectively, it is about everyone being on the same page and how you can prepare best for everyone to kind of be successful within that realm. So I guess it goes both ways. You as a younger player or a younger person within whatever you're trying to gain experience, you're going to do things that make you feel comfortable and make you feel, ready for whatever situation or circumstance you come across. Whereas collectively, you all have to ultimately work on the same page, and that's the importance of being a great team player. Being, and that was really cool to see, even in the realm that I was in the past couple of days, was just to see how big a team can be, but still be so in sync and so on top of things. Everyone went through their own little individual habit and routine beforehand. But when it was showtime and the switches were turned on, it takes so many people to make it happen and to make it successful.
Well, and at the same time, I think that it comes down to trust, because if you, in a TV sense or in a media sense, you're there in Glendale, and it is the innate trust of the individuals that are a part of one aspect of a broadcast, one aspect of a team, that you trust that person next to you is going to put in the preparation. They're going to put in the work. They're going to put in the effort to make sure that they are as ready as the other individuals around them in whatever sphere we're talking about, whether it's on air, behind the scenes, whether it's all the camera folks, everybody in the truck. It's that element of trust that's there, that I'm going to give you 100%. I'm going to invest all of my time, efforts, and everything between the ears to make sure that everything goes well. I'm going to trust that you, off to my left, off to my right, in front of me and behind me, are going to do the same things. And I think that that's something that you've got to learn over time. And there's also a level of comfort that you have to sit there and just understand. It's like, all right, I'm going to go into this situation knowing that everyone around me is going to have this kind of prep. I mean, trust is a big thing too, whether it's, work or mentees or what have you.
With whatever team you play for or whatever team you're on, all it takes is just one bad apple to make everything go sour, right? And I think you look at that and you realize, okay, everybody has to be on the positivity train. Everybody has to be on the uplifting train, especially within the environment that I was in the past couple of days. Anyone's negativity can result to disaster. And I've been on teams before to where that has happened, and I've been on teams before where you're able to work through those hiccups, because I think that's That's what's so cool about even being within the last couple of days on stage and within that environment that I was in, is that you have to go in. It's just like you tell every mentee, you have to go in expected with already these expectations that mistakes are going to be made, whether it's yourself, whether it's everyone around you. But it's not necessarily, what happens after, during those mistakes. It's how you react after, and how everybody else reacts along with you can really determine the success rate within each and every team and environment.
Because if there is and I'm gonna use air quotes, if there is a mistake in whatever form it is, it's up to the individual and to the collective to plow through it. It's like the mistake happened, we learn from it, we're done, we can't dwell on it. It's time to, if you misidentify a player, you misidentify a play, when you're talking about something, you're staring at a highlight and you get it wrong. But the thing is that you can't get wrapped up in it, because then your brain locks up, you lock up, and nothing is going forward. It's about just basic perseverance in these elements, learning from it almost instantaneously, and putting it to the side and going, okay, I just have to push through this and learn from it here.
Most definitely. There were a lot of moments where I even had those to where right after I spoke, you just thought to yourself, okay, what did I do wrong there? And within the next 5 seconds, when they ask me again, how can I correct it? You're on the spot in a much, and I think that for me, one thing that I can say is going through, and I always mention this to so many kids, is you just have to, you have to practice. You have to practice and practice and practice, and everything that you want to get better at. It doesn't make perfect, but it does make improvements. And I just think back to being in residency or with the national team and going through so many different workshops on how to speak during an interview, or how to answer certain questions, and how to use that positivity even when there's a negative realm around the game or whatever it may be. I think those trainings as a kid helped me so much in regards to being put in those situations and learning with that experience as well.
I know that there are folks that want to kind of talk about Atlanta United a little bit.
Into it.
All right. Well, what happens at the end of matches? You've got a lead, then 30 seconds to go. There's an equalizer, and 3 points turn into one when you had control of a match north of the border. Jason Nix, is there anything that you see in Atlanta United that leads to some of the end of half and end of match lapses, or is it simply focus?
That's a hard one to answer, because everybody's gonna pinpoint the concentration and the focus. But I mean, within the MLS, anything can happen. I think you look at so many different things that can happen, especially within the game, within the end of the games. If I were to look at obviously the Toronto game, there was a lot of momentum built up for that goal, right? There was a lot of momentum that was building up within Toronto's favor for that goal to happen. Whereas you look at the US-Mexico game, right? My personal opinion, I think the US's performance was quite, this might be a very bad word, but shambolic until they scored their first goal. And there was no momentum there before the game. And all of a sudden they score a goal within the 82nd, 83rd minute, and the tides turn, right? And it's still the end of the game. And Mexico had the opportunity to win 2-0 30 seconds before or 15 seconds before the goal, with a lot of momentum going their way. So I don't know if it's lapse of concentration or just, sometimes how the tide goes within certain lapses of the game. I think most important thing that I learned within experience of playing is that at ends of games, you just have to do everything to slow the game down, and whatever that may be, and kicking it long and locking the other team in the corner, getting the ball to the corner, right? You have to have that maliciousness attitude towards doing whatever you can to win a game.
Yeah.
And I think if I were to pick out one particular thing within the game of the AU game against Toronto, it would have been that. There should have been, within the last 5 minutes, whatever foul is needed, whatever way to slow the game down, just to build frustration, right? And I think you want to build frustration within the other team. And I think as a team, AU really allowed the momentum to build for Toronto, and you kind of almost felt it coming when you were watching the game. You thought, oh man, they might get a last one here at the very end, and ultimately it did happen.
Well, and I think it also comes down to decisions in moments. And I think that, there are times when we might be looking for a blanket idea of why something happened instead of focusing on just a decision in a moment. And it's, I know a lot of folks might have been looking at what Santi did, and you're saying, okay, I didn't need, if you'd stayed on your feet to defend, as opposed to going down, trying to slide and preventing a pass at the ground level, then that might have added that little extra bit where Toronto wouldn't have had the shot on goal that would have given you the equalizer, something like that. And I think just as a blanket idea, I think it's safe to say that the sport of soccer comes down to moments and how athletes react in those moments. Then how do they learn from that reaction in that moment going forward? So I guess it's a two-step process for me.
Yeah, it's if they don't score in that play, though, nobody remembers that play for Santi, right?
Right.
It's one of those things to where you're obviously going to remember and pinpoint the things that he's probably done 100 different times, and just once, it ends up happening in a goal. It's just like players creating a foul at the top of the box, right? How many players create fouls at the top of the box? You only remember the ones there where they're scored from on the direct free kick, and it's that guy's fault who made that foul. But if nothing happens, or if it hits the crossbar, if it goes out for a goal kick, or if it hits the wall, nobody remembers that foul. So you're right. There's so many moments that can determine the outcome of a game. I do believe it does have a lot to do with just one thing that they can learn from that experience is just what ways can you slow the game down at the last 5-10 minutes of the game when you really think you have it won.
Greg Garza hanging out with us for the Friday Free Kick here on SDH. Are we predisposed then to negative moments more than we are positive moments these days, do you think, as a society? Because, I mean, you mentioned that, and it's like we only mention offensive linemen in football when they're guilty of a holding call. We don't mention the great kick-out block when the runner, when the running back gets the handoff and he goes for, 25 yards and it's a big first down late in the game. We don't necessarily talk about them until it's good all the way over to an extreme or bad all the way over into an extreme. We don't talk about folks when they do their job. Just when they're doing their job, they don't get noticed. Santi was the six, was that midfielder that you were looking for. We're sitting there, you go, Santi Sosa, that's the guy that I was looking at for 99.9% of the match against Toronto. But we're locked in on that moment late in the match that created the equalizer. Are we more predisposed to looking at negative moments these days than we are positive moments, do you think?
I think the best answer for that would just to be turn on the news and see what's on the news, right? It's you rarely see anything on the news that's quite positive, right? Usually everything on the news is what the heck is going on, this, that, negative this, negative that. So I think as a society, we are very, very much so leaning towards more what can we pick out wrong rather than what's great. But I think individually we have to, it's what we always tell players as well that we speak to, don't worry about and don't stress, don't overanalyze, don't overthink about the things that you're absolute crap at, right? Focus on what you did well so you can carry that into the next game. You can carry that in and build that consistency on things that will ultimately help you rather than hurt you.
How hard is that, though, especially for younger folks who, with all of the stuff going on around them, with peer pressure, with growing up, with adolescence and all these pressures, whether they're self-imposed or external or whatever. And I'm sorry, this is kind of turning into a bit of a psych class today, but How difficult is that for a mentee to lock that negative away and not have it weigh them down? I mean, do you see it as something that is weighing them down more? Is that a generational thing too?
By absolute far, it is. So many younger kids these days only worry about the negative, right? And I think, I personally think social media has been one of the major causes about that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's you look at really famous people, right? You look at really famous people on social media, on Instagram or on Twitter or on whatever it may be, and you see a post that they make, right? And I would love to see the ratio or the percentage of somebody, of a male or female model, right? Of what's the ratio of how many people are picking out negative things about that person rather than positive things. And I bet you it's quite close. And even if it's 50-50, it's still, for me, it just shows that, that negativity will always be there. And I think most kids these days are always dealing with self-acceptance and what others are thinking of them rather than what they can think of themselves. And I think we've all been guilty of that before, right? I think we've all been through those moments to where, I mean, you look at a pro player's life, or even my own personal life, it was judged on how I performed every single day, and it was, being accepted by terms of society within the soccer world, and in regards to, performing, rather than, who you are. And so you deal with that self-acceptance, but I think very good players and very good pros deal with it in a way to where it does not affect them that much, and they're able to carry through with no matter what happens and goes on, outside of their, realm, and outside of what they can control. And you focus more so on what you can control, and there's always going to be those uncontrollable factors, and it is how you cope and deal and block out those external factors that help you within that, line of success.
When it comes to you and Parky and those around you who are mentoring these days, how much of your mentoring is positive reinforcement? How much of your mentoring is reinforcing what you're seeing? And how much of it is creative criticism? What's the percentage these days with those three aspects? I know this almost sounds like Goldilocks and the three
Yeah.
bears, three beds, but
Our constructive criticism is still, I would say, 100% positive.
okay,
100% positive, even with our constructive criticism.
yeah.
I can give you an example of a kid I watched from New York the other day. Really good player, went on trial at, MLS clubs recently. And I watched maybe 3 or 4 of his games, and really good player. But I could notice that there had to be a little bit more of him, right? And in my eyes. And he didn't know we were going to talk about that, but I showed him clips into where I would just ask in the constructive criticism, I'd ask, how many times did you do this in a game? Or how many times did you perform this in a game? And the answer in his mind would be very, very little, very little, very little. Whereas you kind of see after a while, you kind of get this common denominator of, at least he starts to notice, and you show him then that positive, right? Like you said, those reinforcements of, the kid goes, holy moly, actually, you know what? I'm actually really good at doing this, but I'm doing it so little. I need to do it more. And then that's the moment to where the kid, usually kind of smiles and is like, wow, I hopefully just figured this out. Right. And that's where, for me, it's so gratifying. It's so cool to see within the next games that I watch him play. And then you see tons of moments where these things are happening. And, even though that was a constructive criticism moment or a creative criticism moment, like you mentioned, it was still pointed in a direction to where that kid could get some positivity out of it. Right. And, I think the questions that we try and ask and things that we try and do are very tailored towards where they can figure it out themselves. I love showing a lot of things to where they look at it and say, okay, this guy is right. This guy can help me here. Obviously, I always tell every kid we throw so much information at them. I don't want them to remember everything, but I want them to grab onto whatever can help them. And I think that's at the end of the day that the best thing about positive reinforcement is, because after a while, positivity can usually turn into that, rather than if you always go towards the negative. Everyone knows what the common denominator is going to be there.
How often, when you're dealing with your mentees, are they selling themselves short? Do they not realize what they're doing is leading them down a positive track? How and this goes back to the negative versus positive stuff that we see these days. How much of their own criticism is more self-criticism than seeing that their game actually is improving and that they have to be reminded of that?
I think it goes along with how we provide the information and how we tailor it to where they do see those things. A kid, in my opinion, is always going to be self-critical no matter what. Even if it's the greatest play that I've showed him or her, they will still find a way. And it's so cool because sometimes when we do video analysis with these kids, or even when we just ask them in general in the mind, within the mindset, they always gear towards what needs to be better. Or even just like I mentioned with the video analysis, whatever, I might show them the greatest play that I thought that was theirs out of the game, and I won't say anything and I'll let them watch it, and they will still pick out something quite negative. They will still pick out something very self-critical. And it's so cool to then kind of get them to laugh, because I'll laugh at it. And just tell them, look, there's nothing to do. It's interesting to see how they always go towards that route. And I think after a while, you start to notice whenever you start to show more plays that they start to realize, oh, okay, this was actually a great play, right? But I would say the majority of the time, initially, most kids within the first session or second session, if we do video analysis, they gear more towards the negative and self-criticism rather than understanding the positive and the good things that they did. And after a while, they realize the importance of that positivity.
I was going to say, I mean, it's sad that that's the default. And I guess that's because of all of the pressures around them and the pressure that they put on themselves, that being negative toward oneself is their default idea instead of understanding that they are growing in a game.
And that's the interesting thing, because sometimes that pressure is not always coming from them, right? Sometimes a lot of that pressure is coming from the parents. Sometimes a lot of that pressure is coming from their coaches. Sometimes that pressure is coming a lot from their peers. And helping them understand the value of pressure as well can also be a good line and interpretation of kind of meshing all of those things together, right? And I think that, I always ask, that's funny that you said that. I always ask kids when they hear the word pressure, what do they think, positive or negative? And I would say probably about 95% of kids, when they hear the word pressure, they think negative, right? And so then you have to kind of convince them how to see pressure in a positive way and how to use it in a positive way, right? And I always tell them, look, the more you grow and the higher you get, the more pressure you have on you. But look at everything you've done to get there, right? Look at all the work that was put in. And obviously people say pressure is earned or pressure is a privilege. And Mike and I use that all the time. And then we say, well, look on the flip side, right? It's in my career, I got to play against, I use that example. I got to play against Ronaldinho many different times. Well, guess what? I had absolutely no pressure to play against that guy because he's expected to beat me 10 times out of 10 times. And so how do you go there in that mindset of saying, I get to play freely and, whatever happens, because I'm not expected to win. So how do you kind of use those two different, scenarios in regards in a positive way rather than have it bring you down? And I think that's a cool way to view things when you talk about pressure.
Yeah, because there is good pressure, there is bad pressure, and then there's just flat out pressure. And it's how you deal with those three different kinds of pressures that can help you, whether we're talking athletics or real world and jobs and all these kinds of things. What's going on with Beyond Goals these days, other than you globetrotting and being a TV star?
Man, that was like a 1.5 day trip. I got up on Wednesday at like 3:30 in the morning, took a 6 o'clock flight, and then got there, did makeup, all that kind of stuff, was on TV until like 11:30 at night, slept, woke up the next day, hopped on a plane, and boom, back home. So it was a quick in and out trip, but everything with Beyond Goals is going great. We are hoping for some very, very exciting news, hopefully here in the next couple of weeks. And I would say if anyone is interested in sponsoring any kids that feel the need that need mentorship in their lives, this is something that we're really focusing on and dedicating our time to, and trying to help kids from underserved communities. So if anybody knows of any organizations or companies that would love to be involved in providing mentorship, along with a lot of other things that are so important, that's kind of where we're tailored towards at the moment. And it's been something great. We hopefully have something within the works here in a couple of weeks, and can say this is what we started this for.
And if you'd like to break news at any moment, you know where you can break news, because since you and Parky have golden ticket status and can crash whenever you want, just outside.
I'm wearing the gold shirt. I got my unified shirt on today. So
excellent. So Greg, as always, my friend, congratulations on the gig there at the Snake Pit in Glendale. It was great to see you wearing makeup, and we'll catch up with you in a couple of weeks, my friend. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it, man. Have a good weekend, bud.